Now, turning to our program, please welcome Richie Burke, President of Storymark Studios, to introduce our speaker.
Testing. Good afternoon, Rotarians. Today I have the honor of introducing one of my favorite people on planet Earth, rising esports mogul, founder of the Milwaukee Esports Alliance, Brandon Tschacher, known to those close to him as Brando. I was given a pretty buttoned-up intro by Aaron, but I know this guy way too well that I've taken the liberty to add a few things on and move in a different direction. Going back just a little bit, on April 12th, 1986, in Jefferson, Wisconsin, a star was born. You probably wouldn't know this by looking at him, but growing up in Jefferson, he was an elite athlete. This was before esports athletes. Not only did he dunk in an actual basketball game for the Jefferson High School Eagles, he also held the long jump record of 21 feet 3 inches from 2004 to 2018 until a man named Keith Bowling decided to rain on his parade and jump 21 feet 7 inches, according to the internet. He then made his way to the city of Milwaukee to attend UWM, where he was an absolute force on and off the track. Upon graduation, he forewent Olympic trials and instead took an entry-level job at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, where he cut his teeth and fell in love with the city of Milwaukee. Some of his notable community-building highlights include his work with Milwaukee Salvation Army's Echelon Group, where he was one of the founding members and grew the group into the largest Salvation Army young professional group in the entire country. And along with that charitable endeavor, Brandon also hosted a yearly rager at Bradford Beach in the early 2010s called Beers, Babes, Balls Beach Party. This shows his versatility to appeal to a wide range of demographics. Some of the awards he compiled over the years include Milwaukee Business Journal Power Broker, Milwaukee Business Journal 40 Under 40, where he had a very nice headshot that rivaled Zoolander himself, Philanthropic 5 Award recipient, graduate of the last decade at UWM. And although one could argue that he peaked that life in the mid-2010s, he has really reinvented himself and begun a new chapter of life. He and his beautiful wife, Samantha, now have 2 children. As of Saturday, this past weekend, he had number 2. Congrats. And he is spearheading a very fast-growing esports movement in Wisconsin, which he will be presenting on today. On that note, I would like to welcome my good friend Brandon Tschacher to the stage.
Wow. You know what they say, nothing on the internet goes away. So thank you, Richie. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you to all of you for being willing to hear about what's going on in our space today. But also, I've gotten the chance to kind of get to know Rotary clubs a little bit over the past couple of years. And the effort of the organization is incredible. Hearing what you guys did in the community before, and just in general, what I've continued to see, it's honestly makes me proud as a Milwaukee resident that these things happen. So I just want to say thank you to everyone in the room for their giving to the community, giving of their time. And we've got kind of a fun story going on in esports, which I'll keep concise, but that I think can hopefully illustrate a really fun part of what's happening in an industry that isn't often that well known today. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. My daughter, as Richie said, was born Saturday. She was supposed to be born Tuesday of last week. So when I said I would love to speak at this meeting, I did not anticipate that last night would be the first night home, which equated to about 45 minutes of sleep. So if I feel a little loopy or appear to be, a little grace is appreciated. But we're going to talk today about esports and gaming. And I think the thing that I found helpful when kind of having some of this dialogue is to first do a little level set on what we're talking about because it is so new. And I think a lot of people are still kind of getting educated on what the space looks like. So we'll talk at very high levels, just quickly, what is esports, so you can get an understanding of that. Then I found something that people really tend to have a good interest in is about what's going on in esports in the state of Wisconsin. So we're going to kind of just share with you a very palatable way to understand when someone would say to you, hey, do you know anything about this gaming, about this esports? You could say, aha, I do. And then we'll just kind of share a little bit about our role, the way that our organization is helping hopefully shape that and being a part of the ecosystem. So I like Q&A the best. Pontificating is not my favorite thing to do, but they say you got to kind of give a little speech. So we'll talk a little bit through this. So the first thing, what is esports? I think that it was alluded to, and such a wonderful indication by Saj. You can think of it as traditional sports in a way, except for played online or played competitively. So we've listed a couple of the ways that's done today. It can be played on a PC, a computer. It can be played on a console, an Xbox, a PlayStation, or risingly, it can be played on a mobile phone. So there's a variety of ways that you can compete in esports. Much is team-oriented, which we'll talk about today. Imagine as a basketball player competing with your teammates. You do the same in esports. You also have the opportunity to play in a single-player kind of environment, as you would with tennis or other sports of that nature. And then you can actually play traditional sports virtually. And you may be familiar with things like Madden or NBA 2K, some of those titles that are pretty popular. So people are actually playing the traditional sports we know in a virtual environment. I think something that's important to always get out there is that this is a big business already today. We're probably within 10 years of its formation. And as any of you who have nieces, nephews, kids, any relatives or friends with someone under 18, you probably understand the impact that it's having on our world. And so I always think it's important to kind of note those things. Some of the, Sajid mentioned some of the projections. There are others as well. One of the ones we kind of stick to, this year projected to pass over $1 billion in revenue, as he mentioned, by 2030 up to $12 billion. So the revenue side is really growing. And I think, rather than anonymous statistics, which sometimes can be misleading, as we all know where they may come from and who cites them, I think it's important to also kind of understand from the way that this is constituted, how is the money happening in esports? Because it's a really critical part of the equation. If you look at TV deals in NBA or you look at NFL football, you might be somewhat familiar with how a traditional sports model works. Esports is somewhat similar, but with a little bit of nuance. So some of the ways listed up there, media rights, live event ticket sales, merchandise. One that's pretty popular in esports is you can actually purchase in the game. So again, if you know people who play games, get the game for free, and then you pay for things throughout while you play the game. Tournament winnings is a big part of the game. So you win, we'll talk a little about later, but you can win upwards of $500,000, $1 million from winning a tournament, an esports tournament, which is kind of fun. Probably the biggest statistic that I think is relevant and good to know about the industry is around 70% of the revenue comes from sponsorship. And I would say that this isn't totally atypical for, I would call it, club teams or places that are not necessarily able to finance based on their entry fees. So we think a lot about skiing or some of those more niche sports and what it takes to have them succeed. Esports is kind of in that space, but I think it's relevant to mention because when you see all of the data, different than, hey, I paid a ticket to go to the Pfizer to watch the Bucks and the proceeds from that ticket combined pay the players' salaries. Today, esports sort of jumped the gun and jumped into, hey, we've got 1 billion eyeballs. Does anybody want to pay us for sponsorship? And a lot of people said yes. And so that's been a really fun thing to see the industry grow. But as you all know, if you've ever been involved in sponsorships, it's pretty volatile. So the industry as a whole is continuing to evolve and understand what ways can they create recurring revenue outside of the spikes that sometimes come with getting people involved through sponsorship. So just one of those nuanced things I think is relevant to be aware of. Talking through demographics. So esports is more popular at a high level in Europe and Asia. In North America, while we have the largest share of the revenue that is gained from gaming on a per player basis, it is probably more popular in Europe and Central America. In some of those places, we are lagging in terms of our growth there, but a lot of those had a head start. If you're familiar with in the early 2000s, late 90s, PC cafes and the way that a lot of that proliferated through those regions, that created a very strong tie to, at that time, gaming, video games. So where you might have the Packers as our favorite football team in Wisconsin, maybe in Asia, they would have had a local esports team because that was their option and their entry point to the genre. So it's kind of find that kind of interesting to know. It's a global sensation. The United States is growing, but we are not the leaders. Those places are the leaders today. From a gameplay perspective, right? So, I'm old now, I've been told by my son. And it turns out that, back in the day, Sega and PS2 And all of those consoles, that was the access to games. That was how you got to play a video game in arcades before that. The world is continuing to shift in the way that you can consume and play a video game, both recreationally or competitively. So you can see today that the console side of things is starting to wane. It probably, if I had to project, in the next 10 years, we won't have consoles anymore. It'll be cloud-based gaming, and that's going to be incredibly important for barrier to entry purposes. The big one is mobile, as you may expect with everything in the world. A lot of people are playing more video games on their phones, and so we're going to evolve into a world where you can literally take out a phone, maybe amongst each other here, and play a game competitively, and it would be kind of a unique environment. So from a gameplay perspective, just be aware, a lot of different ways to consume it, but that's one of the ways it's growing the most. This was a New York Times article that I think is just very insightful, and again, something just to really talk about. And so the title is Step Aside LeBron and Dak and Make Room for Banjo and Kazooie. I think I cannot stress enough, and it's surprising to me at 37, if people under 22, 23, this is their NBA. This is their NFL. They watch people play video games more than they watch a basketball game on TV, and it's their currency, their social currency, their competitive currency. And so it's one of those things where, you can embrace it, understand it, be aware of it. But I do think, and I'm grateful for opportunities to speak like this because it's culturally relevant. And I'm of the opinion it's important to be aware of kind of what's coming and what's happening. So just an indicative article I feel always gives me the chance to say, hey, this is a big deal and it's kind of fun, but comes with some guardrails. This one, you won't be able to see what it says because the boxes are too small, but probably the most important part from an organization that seeks to create sustainability and grow their industry is this is career paths. So as you see in basketball, football, baseball, right? A lot of aspirational folks saying, hey, I want to go pro in this bad boy, right? You say, well, good luck. In a basketball, it would help to be 6'8", 240 and jump 46 inches, right? You might have a chance at the NBA, and even then, you're probably less than 1%. Gaming is worse than that. It's less than 1%. But the good news is you can actually do it at any height, size, weight, etc. So it's very accessible, but I always try to tell folks or tell people that are aspirational to be professional gamers, I would consider other things, and I point them to a table like this. Similar to how on a football field there's 22 players, but there's 300 workers surrounding the field. The same is true in esports and game development. This is being streamed today. Hello, Internet. But the same thing for gaming. The production value of an esports event will blow your mind. I mean, it is on the level of what you would see in a traditional broadcast or anything else. And the kids, I'll call them kids, they know how to do it. They know how to do all the video editing. They know how to do the graphic design. They know how to do animation. All of those tools that right now still get charged for a lot of money in communities where they aren't understood. So many understand, particularly in esports, how to do it. So we can get into it later, but there's a million different circles around esports that I think are worthy of pursuit versus I'd like to play Fortnite professionally. So I always think that's something to note. So that's the esports landscape. Hopefully, again, just kind of, okay, now we know a little bit more. This is what gaming is. This is what esports is. I hope that is just a high-level detail of what's going on. The probably more relevant conversation is around what's happening here, what's happening in Wisconsin, what's going on in Milwaukee, and that's a pretty fun story. The way that I've always found it easy enough to digest is you can think of it as we have got people participating in leagues and opportunities starting in middle school, going up kind of through college, which is what I've noted here. So we've got two entities that sort of serve the middle school market in Wisconsin on a competitive level, one in Madison, one in Brookfield. We have 113 high schools in Wisconsin today that have an esports team. This is up from 7, I want to say, in 2017. So I think by next year, we'll probably have 200 high schools in the state that are fielding a competitive esports team. So again, when I speak to the data and what we're seeing intrinsically here, it's being seen the most in the scholastic realm. From a collegiate perspective, when we started this organization 4 years ago, there were 21 Wisconsin universities with a program. We're up to 32 now. And I've kind of just got this little map that I think sometimes can be helpful and indicative of where esports is being seen and the total of programs fielding a competitive program in 2024. So sometimes illustrations and visuals can be a little bit helpful. And I think college and high school are one of the places where it is an unstoppable freight train of growth, which is kind of a fun thing. And in Wisconsin, with our 32, we're competitive with places like Michigan, Minnesota, and others where we've actually got a pretty strong density compared to a lot of the country. So very exciting place there. I do always like to mention, if you aren't familiar, obviously we know the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have a professional esports team. It is the only team in the state. They play NBA 2K, which is a basketball affiliate. And we actually, I want to say that they've been around for about 5 years. They won the NBA 2K 5-on-5 championship 2 years ago and took home $500,000, which was very exciting. So that helps their team grow and their players grow. We have professional esports players in Milwaukee. They've got a venue downtown where they cast and live stream their games. It's just a really cool story. It helps us as an organization, and I'll talk about a little bit of what we do, but it helps us have a story to tell nationally. When I speak to here's the growth of Scholastic, here's the growth of Collegiate, all those things are wonderful. They're happening everywhere. But we've actually invested real money in a team in Milwaukee, and so it puts us on the map nationally because there's, I want to say, 16 teams in the NBA right now. They're all affiliates of the NBA team they play or they're with. So it's a very cool story, and we're grateful for them. We have, around the state, around 6 gaming venues. These are places where people can play. They can go in and enjoy, camaraderie and competitiveness. We actually own one of them on the east side of Milwaukee, above the Oriental Theater. So we're very excited about that. And then there's leagues, which I'll touch on later. So we've got a collegiate league, a high school league, and so on. So that's the Wisconsin story, if you will. Something I want to mention because it's really relevant. So esports, as you can think of it, is the competitive gaming side of the equation. Game development is the upstream of that. So game development, you may hear other data points on it, is where people are making the games, right? Software developers, engineers, and so on. They're actually creating the AAA title games that go out and make billions of dollars. So if you think of a Grand Theft Auto 6, Pal World, all of these things that sometimes get in the press if you see them, that's the game development sphere. And we actually have a really strong game development ecosystem in Wisconsin as well, primarily based out of Madison. So I would say 96% of the game development industry is based in Madison. And by last data, I believe I heard about 70 plus LLCs in the state that operate in that space. As a comparative, I believe we are likely the only LLC in the state that focuses on esports, right? So we're the sort of growing part of it. They're the established part of it. And so you can see that in some of the data that's shared. But one thing I do want to call out, so we had Marina and Melly stand up as guests today, but they actually are a Milwaukee-based organization called Terra Localizations. They have over 200 employees across the globe. And what they do is when a game is made, it has to be translated, right? If it's made in America, it needs to go to Germany, it needs to go to France, it needs to go to all these different places so that their experience can be the same as it was intended to by the game developers. And someone needs to make that translation occur in different countries. And Terra Localizations is the company that does that. So if you get a chance, speak with either of them. But I was so grateful they could attend today as guests and also as a part of this dialogue, because when you look at Wisconsin, you've got game development and you've got esports growing, and the two have to work together in order for us to have a really competitive chance nationally to compete. And I say compete because this is not like basketball where you can go pick up a basketball, be on a court, and play the game. Right now, this is all owned by publishers, and they can literally control the outflow of these things. And so there are people trying to own that. And so as an entity and as a groups in Wisconsin, we're trying to make sure that we can capture the opportunity we have ahead of us versus a VC-funded firm on the coast who may say, I can actually own your high school league. So imagine the Wisconsin WIAA basketball scene, but it's owned by somebody in California because they got there first. So kind of on a tangent, but I'm really passionate about this because we've got a really unique opportunity right now. And groups like theirs that are headquartered in Milwaukee, international employees all over, and are a part of that ecosystem, really cool stuff. So that's the Wisconsin Jam. And I'll try to buzz through this. Am I doing all right on time? Cool, solid. So I'm just going to, at a high level, share what we do. And I've actually got some videos, which are way more exciting than me talking. So we'll kind of show you some of the stuff in action. Long and short of it is we exist to try to be a cornerstone of the growth, not only in southern Wisconsin, Madison, Milwaukee, and down, but really for the state of Wisconsin. We want to be a uniting organization that brings groups together to communicate, but also start to help accelerate our growth and compete on a national scale. So that's our mission. We've gotten lots of news, which is very exciting. But one of the ways that we do that is through our events. And so actually upcoming on March 11th at the UWM Panther Arena, we are having our 3rd annual Wisconsin Esports Summit. You're going to see a video of that in a minute, just so you can get a sense of what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think the thing to know about this, maybe similar to other conferences you go to, right? You get a chance to network, you get a chance to learn, you've got breakout sessions, panels. That's really this event's intention, but you get to do so in a fun way, which is kind of the fun perk of gaming. So let's just take a look at what that event looks like to give you an example.
huge shout out to everyone for being here. Thank you for coming. You guys put on an amazing show, and we'll see you back here in 2024. Thanks, Brandon!
So I think that's just an example of what, kind of the industry side can look like. The next thing I'm going to share is a short video about a tournament. And so the difference is we partnered with the Milwaukee Bucks and Bucks Gaming to put on the state's largest gaming tournament last year at the Baird Center. And so what you'll see here is what it looks like to bring 600 people from about 10 different states to compete in a video game tournament, the first of its kind in the state of Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, thankfully, where we held it. We hope this year to go somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 attendees, and it's going to continue to grow from there. The largest in the country is 25,000 held in Las Vegas. So again, I think it's fun to see kind of what that looks like. So we'll show you a little video about the event, Cream City Convergence.
Milwaukee, we are here. Finally, we're here. Many, many months in the making, and we're finally here at the Baird Center for Cream City.
It's been a crazy journey, but it's feeling really good right now.
The heart of gaming is people connecting and enjoying themselves with one another.
So it feels really cool to that Wisconsin finally has this, and I don't have to go to another state for it. It feels really nice.
Let's go, Stiggy.
City Convergence, Macho, our champion.
Our first place Melee champion, Skurzo!
Ooh, stage control is important. Oh, it's another one. Misses the PK fire conversion, and Ned, one edge guard away from taking Cream City Convergence with the back air. Beautiful DI. And in game 5, refusing to get reset, Ned takes Cream City Convergence over Atada.
Only Fireball catches the fucking back. I'm not done talking to you. You're through. Eli.
Hopping off a little.
The Chester. Grand Finals reset. Cream City reset.
And leveraging the plus frame side.
No! This is going to be a whip, and Jack is going to take it. He is your C3 champion.
You see that it's just an incredibly unique ecosystem, and the production value. We flew in people from all over the country who put that out in a consumable format that would rival most professional sports. And so it's just a very cool story. We're excited about it as an event, and it's a part of what our organization is seeking to create. So I'll try to skip through some of the rest because I like Q&A, if there is any, more than continuing to talk. But I think important to know what we work on, legislation, right? So there's actually a bill going through Madison right now, working on tax credits for the game development industry. Currently what's happening with that 70 plus LLCs I mentioned in Madison is a lot of them are hiring employees in Quebec or North Carolina where there are tax credits rather than hiring in Wisconsin because it's 40% more expensive. So we're working on that. We're also working on innovation grants on the esports side to help create more opportunities for high school programs. So a lot of fun going on there. We put out all sorts of resources. We've got a newsletter. Who doesn't have a newsletter? And we also now, we own 2 collegiate leagues. So the Wisconsin Collegiate Rocket League and the Wisconsin Valorant League. In the fall, we intend to drop the Wisconsin Collegiate Esports League. I mentioned earlier why this is important, right? So today there are 2 conferences in the country for esports, one of which has about 500 universities now. And it's just folding under the weight of basically being too large. And so what we're going to try to step in and do is give our local 32 universities a chance to compete against one another, the chance to have rivalries at an MSOE, at a Marquette, at a UW Milwaukee, versus somewhat right now, which happens, which is you may play a team in Hawaii or play a team in New York, which is great, but it doesn't always get the fan base riveted or the donors at those universities all that interested. So we do leagues, and then, as always, thanks to the partners. So questions, thoughts, feelings, that's the end of the official presentation.
Thank you, Brandon. If you have a question for Brandon, you may do so using the microphone here. As always, please keep your questions concise and topical.
Great presentation. It looks like a really fun new development or developing story in Wisconsin. How does motorsports work into that, your league and your group, and what are your comments about that?
On the motorsports side? Yeah, so I would say it's one of the more interesting developments that I'm super excited about. So today I mentioned how games are played, right? PC, console, mobile. I've got a vision or a belief that in the next 10 to 20 years, we started to see it already with Apple headsets, that AR, VR, and sort of recreational gaming is going to take hold in a really big way, just as the technology improves. And so there's actually a sim racing league that exists right now. A setup is about $30,000, but you can imagine putting and literally competing in a racing environment similar to what you might expect on a course, which is really exciting. So I think it's great. We're very excited about it. We actually just partnered with Milwaukee Montessori on a drone racing event taking place at the Pettit. So we're trying to operate both within the now for what exists and where the places are, but we're also trying to think ahead to the future, and that's AR, VR, and augmented mixed reality, if you will, and that's where some of that comes in. So very bullish on it, and I think you start to see things like the Apple headset, the Omni Pro, and different technologies like that. I think that's the future, realistically, for competitive esports. So very good on it. Great question. That's what I'm excited about.
Congratulations on all the progress in your vision. Pretty impressive. As you talked about diversity a little bit, Wisconsin-wide interest in kids as the next generation of Wisconsin, a state that's divided by race, culture, regions, beliefs, and so forth. Given your vision, do you have any thoughts about the role of esports in youth in bringing the state, a divided state, together?
Thank you for that question. I would say that it gets me the most excited from what I hope can be a life lived with legacy and impact. The cool thing about gaming, some of the statistics you would hear or learn, is pre-high school, it's pretty split, male-female, 50-50. You've got socioeconomic high, low. It's basically the melting pot. Everyone can play. Once you get to college and beyond, some of that starts to change. But I look at it as one of the central figures, hopefully, in the continuing world for people to be equitable and accessible and play together. And so, I see Wendell is over here, and formerly we worked with the MPS Foundation, right, to bring some MPS esports programs, and he was instrumental in that. And I look at the access that has provided and the teamwork that has provided. And now they have leagues and teams that are competing in our high school association and JV, varsity, etc. It's paramount. I think it provides the platform as well as any other tool that I'm aware of to help combat some of those issues that we're all aware of. But I'd also be remiss not to share that, of course, within the platform, there are lots of issues that still have to be worked out. And so I think that's where it becomes very critical for leaders, both educators and business leaders, community leaders. I would be advocating to take a role in this, because you can oftentimes put guardrails around the experience that help just that amount. At our event, we're going to have a gal speaking who got about 1.5 million TikTok followers in about 6 months via gaming. She's a student at UW-Madison. 5 months later, she quit because it was such a toxic community in her description, right? And so you have to say those things are true, but you also can think about if you have parents, educators, people around them to help curate that experience and keep it how we believe it's best served, it's as impactful as anything you can hope for. So a great question, and something that probably makes it worth it for me, because the revenue has not yet followed all the numbers. So we're doing a lot of this in growth mode, but thank you.
I never thought I would be the one to ask the old fogey question, but I guess my time has come. You mentioned that very few of us at any age could ever compete in professional sports, but watching Johnny Unitas or Oscar Robertson or now Giannis, I assume inspires people to turn off the TV and go out and engage in sports. Is anyone studying the risks or the possible downside of what may be encouraging people to stay in front of the TV, engage in a virtual reality, sedentary activity, and then that much more time staring at a screen, which we all do too much of, I think?
Yep. No, it's the right question to ask. And Marito's asking me what question you get the most. It's that. But the good news is I answer it both as a parent as well as a business owner, right? And so I think as we know, in most things in life, moderation is key. And so that's a message that I'll preach at any place that I get the opportunity to answer the question. We do have data that would share that in terms of academics, in terms of team orientedness, what we see particularly in the scholastic and collegiate level is that this provides a community where previously a community didn't exist. So these may not have been the high school quarterback, right? This may have been a community that previously didn't have people to congregate with or have a reason to come to school. One of the big things about MPS that we were so excited with is they were working on bringing kids back to school once COVID happened and there was an issue with kids leaving. We thought, how might gaming play a role in incentivizing them to come back and re-engage? So there's a lot of positives to it. I would say that with anything, if you do it too much, it's not going to be healthy, right? And so we try to preach that message of moderation. And I would say also coaches, programs, again, in that curated environment we're describing, if you were to go to the Carthage University Esports program, they have as rigorous a workout program physically as they do video game competitively, because it actually equates to success. We know that hand-eye coordination improves when you're in better physical shape and take care of yourself and eat healthy. So in the professional, or I would call it curated environments, the mix is really important. If you just talk in the recreational sense, if someone plays Fortnite 24 hours a day, not a good choice. Like, we can just say that with confidence. But I think that's what we're working to create guardrails around to help. But from the data side, education, teamwork, community, we have shown to be increasing through the access to esports. So I think it's an encouraging story, but as I say, I think we have to always preach moderation in a realistic way. But great question. It's very true.
How you doing?
Good.
I have an 11-year-old, and so he does not like moderation. But my question is, in talking about, you showed the slide with the unlimited options. What are ways and avenues that those opportunities can be exposed to my 11-year-old because he only thinks that he wants to be a professional gamer?
Yeah, I would tell you that's a part of the reason we hope to exist. One of the exciting parts is I get a lot of calls from parents, and I get a lot of calls from people saying, hey, my kid loves this. I mean, nonstop. But I'm not so keen on, them just sitting inside and playing all day long. So what can I do? So we try to direct them to some of the leagues I mentioned, to some of the resources I mentioned, to an event like what I mentioned, because what I found is if we can give them more access to leaders, people who are professionals in it, and those that understand, and I would call it authentically want to see it grow. Let's make no doubt about it. With growth this fast, there's money grabs happening everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of VC funding falling into this space right now for people trying to capture the market, and that's okay. But there are a lot of also people who are really concerned about student and under 18 well-being, because with money grabs can oftentimes not come their best experience. So I would tell your son or whomever, please reach out to us, because we'll literally put you in touch with a league, put you in touch with a leader in the scholastic space. Like, we really want to be a conduit for that. That's not going to be the end-all, be-all solution. We're continuing to grow in people's awareness. But I'm hopeful orgs like ours and others can start to kind of permeate into their awareness where they have a place to go ask the question. And previous to this, there wasn't. So that's, moderation in an 11-year-old. That's tough. Love it.
Thanks, Brandon. This is a very exciting topic, even for cultural dinosaurs. But the question I have is, we have a pretty robust scholarship program here at the Rotary Club in Milwaukee. And the way that encourages students to learn is if they have some fun. So you showed this chart with all these different expertises that are required. And I'm wondering if there's some way to help students that we mentor go towards careers that would tie into their love of gaming. I think Antoine, you mentioned education. Antoine mentioned his 11-year-old. Is there a way we could somehow tie in the educational aspects, whether it's technical schools or college, to take advantage, and then they would still have the background of gaming?
Yeah, there are. I think what we've found, because I don't want to that chart is really fun and good and true. But the economics of esports, as I mentioned, are not so robust yet that we can say, if you go get a certification or a credits in esports, you've got a job waiting for you. So a lot of times what I preach is entrepreneurialness, go become a creator. But the path that we have found is when you attribute that education to related fields, it also becomes a little bit of like a golden nugget. So the example I would give is, I think 3 years ago, we created a workforce development program with a provider in Wisconsin. And previously, that program was marketed under get your CompTIA A+ certification. And with that, you get to be a help desk technician. Very in-demand position. If you get this certification from Microsoft, it's pretty likely you can get about a $60,000 to $80,000 job pretty quickly, right? So what they found, though, is it's really not that sexy, right, to get a CompTIA A+ certification. So they wouldn't always get candidates. Well, all of a sudden we said, well, what if? What if we just did, you can get your CompTIA A+ certification, and you can also get a badge in esports hardware software. And all of a sudden we had 50 applicants. Because if you throw in gaming as a part of learning, all of a sudden everyone goes, I'll raise my hand for that. So I think that we're still in the precipice of figuring out how does that work. But when it comes to incentivizing or creating at least a more of a want to for STEM or related fields, if you include the gaming element, that we've found people going that direction. And so there's a couple of universities in Wisconsin for the tangible side of this that are offering certifications and some micro accreditation in the esports space. You could make a tie to a high school student or below saying, here's where you could go and continue your education at UW Superior, UW Stout. There's a couple that have happened. So that's the technical answer and then some of the background, I would say. Good question.
Yeah, really interesting presentation. One of the comments that you made was that one of the largest venues for this draws 25,000 people in Las Vegas. And that started me thinking, is gambling happening related to this? And if so, what impact, positive or negative, do you see that having on this?
Yeah, great question too. You guys are really good questions. So I would say that the gambling side of this thus far has been more relevant in Europe. And the reason for that is because, again, they're more advanced than us. So they're holding $25 million prize pool tournaments. And so then you have issues with gambling and you have issue with match throwing, and it's pretty wild. We don't have that as much here because it isn't quite as high of prize pools and it's not quite as mature. And frankly, people don't know how to yet. So there have been a couple folks that have tried to get into it. A public company just delisted that was kind of giving it a go. So thus far, not. But I think at this point, the community sort of moderates it. It's fairly, it'd be like if LeBron James were playing me in a one-on-one game and he lost. You'd be like, something's amiss. You can kind of tell in esports at this point, like it's going to be competitive for those that are high level, but we just had for one of our tournaments a qualifier and a buddy threw a match for his friend. And we knew. So they both got disqualified. No, shame. So like it's not on a national level huge in the United States. It is a problem in Europe for a couple titles, but I think thus far we've decided not to get any sponsorships from DraftKings. So I think that like we got too many kids involved for what we're doing and too many educators that would like jump all over that. So we had another insightful question.
Yes, I have a question that's related but a little odd in that I'm wondering about the sensory aspects of gaming at this level. For young people that have epilepsy, for an example, gaming is not a great thing because it can invoke seizures. So are you aware of anything that is being done to address that? I mean, I know that's part of the excitement, all the pinging and ponging and noise and stuff, but it's not necessarily very brain healthy.
Yeah, so there's I wouldn't call it, I don't know how to describe it. There's a growth in what I would call accessible gaming. We invested in an organization here in Milwaukee called Ecclusion, which was creating adaptive gaming equipment for paraplegics. It was a mouthpiece where you could learn to be able to use the mouthpiece to play in game. We've got an organization in Madison called Access to Independence that has been creating resources for disabled individuals to be able to compete and play. We've talked to Special Olympics of Wisconsin. So when you ask that question, my mind goes to there's a rising tide of people asking that question and trying to answer it. I think on the visual side, I don't know of many that are saying we have a solution to that, but I think the solution that's trying to be found is how can we allow those that would like to play more games that thus far have not been able to get involved. And so, yeah, it's not as aware as I'd like it to be. It really, you talk about when you watch somebody with a mouthpiece play a game for the first time and it gives them meaning, like it kind of hits you, So like I'm optimistic for more growth there, but still growing. Thanks for the questions, you guys. This is awesome.
My question relates to what kind of guardrails are in place not to expose young people to much violence in terms of the kinds of games that they play.
Yep. So I talk about these curated leagues and experiences. That's where we can do it. Where we can't do it is in people's homes or living rooms or bedrooms, right? So that is just something I think that as parents and as community, we've got to just be aware of. That's where probably the most awareness is needed. But when it comes to a league, like the leagues we run or others, you have content and community moderators. You've got people watching to make sure that these things are taking place and hopefully a positive environment. I would also say that for something like a high school or below, anything that gets into a middle school or high school at this point in a curated league, there's no shooting. I mean, it's just pretty much a widely accepted principle that you're going to be playing racing games. You know, you keep it recreational. So at this point, I wouldn't say it's an issue. And what I might describe as the most vulnerable communities, you know, they don't even really get allowed to play those things in a curated league. Again, we have to be aware that most of them people playing are not in curated leagues, so they could get access to those things. And you know, you take off what you can, but that's how it's being done today. Great question.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.